There's a word for the person who always says yes. Reliable, selfless, kind, easy to be around. And for a long time, maybe your whole life, you believed those words were compliments. That being the person who never says no, never disappoints, never makes things difficult was something to be proud of. Something that made you valuable. Something that made you safe. But here's what nobody tells you about always saying yes. It's not generosity, it's fear. And the life you've been building around never saying no. The exhaustion, the resentment, the quiet disappearance of yourself has a name. And understanding that name might be the most important thing you do this year. Let's start with where people-pleasing actually comes from. Because it doesn't start as a choice, it starts as a survival strategy. Somewhere early, in childhood, in a household where love felt conditional, where conflict felt dangerous, where the emotional atmosphere required careful management, you learned something important. When I make people happy, I am safe. When I disappoint people, something bad happens. And your nervous system, which is extraordinarily good at learning what keeps you safe, filed that lesson away and began running it automatically. Every time you sensed someone's displeasure, every time you felt the threat of conflict approaching, every time saying what you actually wanted felt like it might cost you something you couldn't afford to lose. Say yes. Smooth it over. Keep the peace. Disappear a little more. It worked. That's the thing. It worked. In the environment where you learned it. Keeping people happy kept you safe. Managing everyone else's emotional state kept conflict at bay. Being endlessly agreeable gave you a role, a function, a reason to be valued. The problem is that the strategy didn't stay in childhood. It followed you into adulthood, into relationships, into friendships, into your career, into every room you have ever walked into. And in those rooms, as an adult with actual choices and actual power, it stopped being survival and started being self-abandonment. Here's what chronic people-pleasing actually looks like from the inside. It looks like saying yes when every part of you is screaming no, like agreeing with opinions you don't hold because the alternative feels too risky, like apologizing for things that are not your fault, like shrinking your actual needs into something small enough that nobody can object to them. It looks like feeling responsible for everyone else's emotional state, like it is somehow your job to make sure nobody around you is uncomfortable, upset, or disappointed. Like a room full of people's feelings is something you have to manage single-handedly. It looks like the inability to receive criticism without it feeling catastrophic, like needing approval so constantly and so urgently that you have built your entire self-concept on the shifting foundation of other people's reactions to you. And it looks like resentment, quiet at first, building slowly, the specific resentment of someone who has given and given and given without ever being asked what they actually need, and has never asked either. Psychologists call this the Fawn response. Most people know the fight or flight response, the nervous system's reaction to threat. Fewer people know about Fawn. Fawn is what happens when fighting feels too dangerous and fleeing isn't an option. When the safest response to threat is to appease, to become whatever the threatening person needs you to be, to make yourself so agreeable, so useful, so non-threatening that the danger passes. It was first described in the context of trauma responses. And that's important, because what it tells us is that chronic people-pleasing is not a personality quirk. It is a trauma response. It is the nervous system doing what it learned to do to survive. Which means you cannot simply decide to stop. You cannot logic your way out of it. You cannot make a list of reasons why saying no is fine, and have that be enough. Because the people-pleasing doesn't live in the rational mind. It lives in the nervous system, in the body, in the part of you that still believes, at some automatic level, that making someone unhappy is genuinely dangerous. Let's talk about the cost. because the cost of people-pleasing is enormous and almost entirely invisible to the people around you. The first cost is the loss of self. When you have spent years, decades, shaping yourself around what other people need, want, and expect, the question of what you actually need, want, and expect becomes genuinely difficult to answer. The self that exists independent of other people's reactions to it becomes hard to locate. People-pleasers often describe a profound confusion about their own preferences, opinions, and desires. Not because they don't have them, but because they have spent so long suppressing them that they have lost easy access to them. The second cost is the quality of your relationships, because relationships built on people-pleasing are not real relationships. They are performances. And the person on the other side of the relationship, who believes they know you, who thinks they are close to you, is actually close to a carefully managed version of you. A version edited for palatability. A version with all the inconvenient, complicated, genuine parts removed. Real intimacy requires a real self to be intimate with. And people-pleasing removes the real self from the equation. So what does recovery actually look like? It starts with the hardest thing, which is tolerating the discomfort of disappointing people, not causing harm, not being unkind, but disappointing, saying no, having an opinion that someone disagrees with, setting a limit that someone doesn't like, and sitting with the discomfort that follows, the anxiety, the guilt, the urgent pull to fix the other person's reaction, without acting on it, without apologizing for what you said, without taking it back, because that discomfort is not evidence that you did something wrong. It is your nervous system running the old program, the one that learned that disapproval is dangerous, the one that has been keeping you safe and keeping you small for decades. Every time you tolerate that discomfort without collapsing back into yes, you are updating the program. Slowly, imperfectly, with a lot of backsliding. But you are updating it. Here's what I want to leave you with. Saying no is not selfish. It is the most honest thing you can offer another person, because it means that when you say yes, you actually mean it. A yes that comes from fear is not generosity. A yes that comes from genuine willingness, that is. And you are allowed to be a person whose yes means something. You always were. If this hits something you've been managing for a long time, you already know what it's pointing at.